Today we'll be discussing the mistakes that people make that make them regret relocating and how to prevent those mistakes.
Yeah, people just decide to relocate on a whim. And, sometimes if you're young, you can do that. But, you really should have a plan. And having a plan is going to make it go really well and make it a smooth transition.
Today we'll be discussing the mistakes. Yeah, so people don't just move across the town anymore or across the county, they move across the country. And with that in mind, there's just so many factors that people need to keep in mind so they don't make a major mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is, the cost of living is going to be a big driver for relocation, but in two ways. Some people relocate because they're trying to save money, and other people relocate not realizing how much more expensive it is where they're moving. And that can be a mistake if you don't plan that out correctly and really understand how much it's going to, cost you to live.
Yeah, and there's different utilities, there's different fees, and even different tax structures from one location to another. So, one comment we get in our rural areas is, wow, the taxes are so high. It's like, yeah, it's because there's less properties to share in all of the essential services, such as police and fire and street improvement projects and stuff. So, something to keep in mind is, yes, like the price of the house is one thing, but also figuring out your escrow for insurance and taxes as well, because that can drastically change your monthly payment.
Yeah. And you have to understand what you feel comfortable with. Like if you're, I always say, like, you need to err on the side of caution when buying a home, as far as you don't want to overstretch yourself on the mortgage payments, and you need to understand other costs that are where you're moving, right? Like, for example, in Arizona in the summer, most likely you're going to have HVAC issues because it's 115 out and the air is blasting 24/7. And, where you're at, it's going to be more, issues with snow and around that, I would assume, right?
Yep. Snow furnaces going out on Christmas Day in the winter, like making sure that you're getting that annual maintenance. And if you're used to living in a warmer climate and for whatever reason you move to a colder climate, those are just things in mind that you want to be mindful of before you purchase a certain property.
Yeah, and I think another mistake people make is, they make a mistake in the zip code that they buy in.
Yeah, it's a huge deal, especially with different changes of one side of town versus another, or even one county versus another. Or with us, the state line is not far away. So it's like you move 1 mile to the west and you're in South Dakota, very different tax climate, very different political climate. And those are real factors for people that we're seeing come up when people are locating and they're wanting to know the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, and it's really smart when people do contact somebody like a realtor that lives in those areas. Like I just had a girl call me yesterday and they were looking at, buying an investment property in Arizona. And she said, hey, these are the ones I've been looking at. And she sent them to me. And two out of the three, I'm like, I don't think you want, based on the criteria that you told me, I don't think that this is where you want to invest, right? But you need someone on the ground because to her, it all looked the same. It looked like Phoenix. It looked like a decent area in Phoenix. But I know the nuances, right? And you know the nuances.
Yeah.
And so you need a realtor
Yeah.
that's really going to tell you, and some realtors will, and some just want to sell you any house. So you just have to be careful and mindful of that. But, based on, those could be in good investments depending on what somebody wants. But, she wanted a Class B property. She wanted it, to be in an area that's very accessible, that people want to live. And a lot of the places she was sending me were more Class C. They were kind of on the outskirts of town, but she couldn't really tell based on the map of Phoenix. So that's why, when people just an investor or even somebody moving here buys something and they just assume that this is a good area, like you really need to work with someone you trust. And I honestly think you need to visit too. Like I would never buy anything blindly. I think you need to go see, like, because I know people that moved super north, not understanding that they were, 45 minutes outside of all the good restaurants and everything that they want to do. And it's a good area, but it's not like an area for them. And then now you have this house that you're living in and you're 45 minutes away and you want to relocate, when you want to move, but that's not really feasible to move and then move again.
We had clients that were selling, they were out in Nevada somewhere, they moved to Southwest Minnesota, and to your point, they never came and looked at the property. So this agent in our office was really mindful of doing a thorough video showing, which is great, but it fully does not replace walking through the property. So what they did, they sold their really, expensive property in Nevada, moved to Minnesota, and they're like, great, this is great. Our cost of living is so low. They came to the property. They got there at like midnight and they slept there. And the next morning, the first call was to their realtor. Yeah, you were right. We didn't want this property. Let's relist it. They didn't even own it for 24 hours and they wanted to put it back on the market.
But you're going to lose money
Crazy.
that way because you have to realize even if you can sell it for the same amount, I always think buyers are going to wonder why you were there 24 hours or a week or a month. It's always kind of a flag, right? Like, is something wrong with it? Did they move in and there's an issue? And the other thing is you're going to pay realtor fees. So, you're, even if you sell it for the same amount, you're still losing money. So try to avoid that. I really encourage people to fly out, even if you don't buy a house. Like, I have investors where they fly out and I show them a bunch of different areas, right? Like, this is what North Phoenix looks like. This is what Scottsdale looks like. This is what South Scottsdale looks like. This is what Tempe looks like. And then they tell me, I love this area. I hate this area. I don't want to invest in this area. And we figure out where they want to invest. So then once they find a house they like, they feel more comfortable putting it under escrow because it's like, I know I like this area. And I'm able to show them on FaceTime the house. The house is... I don't want to say it's very important, but it's also like very easy to see on a screen. What's not easy to see on a screen is the area. So that's how a lot of people do it. And that's how I would do it. If I was going to be investing in another state, I would fly out there. I would have the realtor take me around. I want to see it all. I want to see the good, the bad, the ugly, all the areas that I looked at that I thought I liked and see where I was right and see where I was wrong. And then I would feel comfortable being like, okay, like I'm good. Like I like that area and I like this house, and so it's just, I think that is a big piece. Like if you're going to invest in a house, invest in a plane ticket and a hotel for one or two nights, Yeah.
And think about it. Like, yes, it comes at a cost, but if you totally regret your buying decision and you get stuck with the property, what's going to cost you more in the long run? Like, don't be so cheap that you don't want to buy a plane ticket or a hotel, and make a very poor decision because not only would you have realtor fees sunken in the cost, which is valuable to have their insight, but also you would have like loan origination fees if you're not paying cash. Like those are all of the different things that you don't get back when you go to resell.
Yep. And I think another mistake people make is they don't look at migration trends. So, obviously what migration trends do is they show how the value of an area, right? If there's a net positive migration pattern, that means they're going to need more housing, rents are going to go up, cost of home ownership is going to go up. If it's negative, that's going to mean rents are going to go down, home prices could go down because there's just not as much demand for it.
Yeah. So you can look at things like U-Haul, maps where people are moving from and people are moving to. There's lots of different resources online that you can look at. It is something to be mindful of. And maybe you're relocating to move closer to family. Well, then maybe the migration trends aren't as important, but there's still something to be mindful of, especially if you're going to be investing a decent amount of your money into a property.
Yeah, and exactly. It's not always the most important thing, but if you are trying to get that equity like long term, then obviously areas with positive migration are going to just have more housing demand.
And on the flip side, most people don't move very far. So when you do, it's such a big deal. So don't regret not thinking through all of the factors if you're relocating, especially if you're relocating away from family, because statistics say 60% of young adults live within 10 miles of where they grew up, which is huge, So if you're moving away, you're definitely in the minority when it comes to that.
Yeah, 100%. And, you have to also look at your pre-approval, right? Just because you're pre-approved in one area does not mean you're necessarily going to be pre-approved in another area.
Yeah. You have to make sure that your lender is licensed. Maybe you've used the same lender for a while, but that lender isn't approved in a different state. Well, then working with your local realtor or somebody that to get a referral to a good lender. Like, don't just go online and fill something out with Rocket Mortgage or, XYZ mortgage company. Like, really get a referral because who you work with really matters. Even on the lending side, like absolutely on the realtor side, but also on the lending side, it makes such a difference on the smoothness of the transaction, especially when you're not there. You're moving from another state or another area.
Yeah, and you brought up something I thought was interesting too, is what you check on your home inspection. So say you get a home under contract, and this is where your realtor's expertise comes into play, assuming that they do have expertise in this. Like I know in Phoenix for us, I always recommend my clients do a sewer scope because we
Yeah.
get roots in the line and plumbing can be a really big issue. It's not cheap, it's extra $300, but plumbing issues are very expensive. So you want to do that. And then we always want to check for termites here too, because a lot of homes here do have termites. It's not a big deal, but it needs treated. So you're either going to have to pay for the treatment, it's about $300 once you move in, or you're going to check and make sure that it doesn't have termites to treat. But that's a whole nother thing, is like, I know that termites aren't that big of a deal, but you might think, oh my God, termites, that's a hell no,
Yeah.
right? Where
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
the kind we have, they don't like destroy the house to the point you can't live in it, but they're a nuisance and they aren't good to have. And so you do treat them, but they're not like the kind of termites that, your house is going to fall over from. But, but it's good to know.
I wouldn't know that. If
Yeah.
I were to relocate to Arizona and I was like, oh, there's termites, I'd be like, oh shit. Well,
Yeah,
'cause
like
I
this is
wouldn't
bad.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is bad. Well, and I bet in Minnesota there's stuff that I don't know about.
Yeah, well, for sure. Septic systems is a big one where you got to get compliance certificates from the county. Otherwise, you're forced to replace. That's a big one. The other one, when you mentioned sewer scopes, they're actually required in certain municipalities, require them before you can even change utilities into a name. Like they require a compliance certificate saying that your sewer line is clear or compliant. Otherwise, they need a plan for replacement. But every town is different. So some towns require it and some towns don't.
What's interesting is, before I was a realtor, I used realtors to buy my first 4 properties, and always a different one. But nobody ever told me to get a sewer scope because they're not required here. And now being a realtor, and then, obviously being more informed than I used to be, I have every client get a sewer scope because they're $300 and there could be a sewer issue, and a sewer issue is a really big deal. And those are the things when you use a realtor that I was not mindful enough of. You have realtors that want you to do as least of an inspection as possible because they want you to buy the house. You have other realtors that want you to check every single box because they want you as a repeat customer and they want to make sure that you're happy and you don't have these glaring huge issues. And so you need to find a realtor that cares about that stuff. And honestly, if you are, somewhere and you're like, hey, what test should I get done if I do go under, escrow, have them give you a list. And if they're not listing all the tests, then I would move on because that's not a good realtor.
Radon. Do you have radon in your area?
No. I know what it is, though. In Ohio, we did.
Okay. Colorless, odorless gas, worth the extra 50 to $100 to add it on to an inspection. And some people want to go on the cheap. It's like, no, don't do that. Spend the $100. Then if it's high. If you have to mitigate it, it's $1,500 to $2,000 depending on the venting out. But that's a thing that then it can become a negotiating point. So it's really important.
Yeah. And honestly, if somebody has like an older HVAC system, I always have an HVAC tech come out. If they have an older roof, I always have a roofer come out. I mean, like, it depends on the age, right? If it's only a few years old and the inspector says it's working fine, then that's fine. But inspectors they're not experts at every single system in the house. And so to me, like, it's worth this extra money because you want to know if there's issues, because you would rather have the seller fix them than you have to fix them when you move in.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we don't want buyers to regret is making an emotional decision, because obviously relocating is a very emotional decision. If you're relocating for family or for a job or something, there's your heightened emotions can help play into either making a really good or really negative decision. So really relying on that local expert in that area and taking what they have to say to heart, is just really important, because it can be expensive and it can definitely change your life if you buy the wrong house and then you get stuck with it. Like, these are major decisions. So who you work with really matters.
Yeah, and Tara and I put together a packet for you guys that are looking to invest or looking to relocate, and you can click here. It's just really good tips that we have if you want to scan that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you said, about an emotional decision. So I think one of the big things just in general with relocating and buying a house in general, but especially relocating, is you have to trust your realtor. If you don't fully trust them, I just had a friend call me. She's in a different state, and she was asking me all these questions about her realtor, and she goes, I don't really feel comfortable asking my realtor because I don't know if she's going to tell me the truth. So I want to get your opinion. You need to trust your realtor. Your realtor should tell you the truth. If you don't think that they're telling you the truth, or you don't fully think they are, you need to get a new realtor, because this is your person. Like I just took clients to go see new builds this weekend. The new build guy's trying to sell them, right? And I get it. And they were a good deal, but I had him go away. And afterwards, I talked to them and I said, listen, I don't care what you guys do. I want to make sure you love this house. And you can talk to me. I don't want you just talking to each other, because I can give you really good insight. I know you have questions. You're first time home buyers. We're a team. The three of us, we're a team. It's not you against me and I'm going to try to pressure you and I'm going to get mad if you don't buy it. You really, if you don't feel really good about your realtor, you can just say, I don't want it. And they're going to get upset with you, or they're going to lie to you to try to get you to buy something. You have to find a new realtor, because that is just not what you want. Your realtor is on your team.
Absolutely. And I've had clients that just called me and they wanted to look at one house and they were dead set on buying that house. And great. Sounds like an easy sale, right? I'm always saying, are you sure? Can we please look at 2 or 3 other properties that are similar so you can see the pros and cons? And then you have buyer's remorse less if you feel like you've looked at all of the options, and then maybe it'll even make you like your original house more or make you feel more solid, but then you don't have that, well, maybe we should have looked at another house, after the fact. It's nope, let's at least look at a couple of properties. I know you love this property, but let's look so you make sure. It's kind of that. And a good realtor is going to do that. Where a realtor that's just out to make a quick dollar might just be like, yep, let's just look at that one and let's write it. And yep, you like it. Let's go.
Yeah, exactly. So. And that's the biggest thing too, because when people look at other properties, it should make them love the one that they want the most, right?
Yep.
Not vice versa. So, depending on how long we've been looking and how picky the person is, I'm always like, yeah, let's not. I've had investors from out of state where I'm like, okay, I know you love this house. I don't think this one's anything special. So let's just keep looking and then see if you still like it, in a few days, but I would tell you, I walked in the first house with these investors the other day. It was a great deal. I was like, they're like, we want it. I'm like, you guys should get this one. If you don't get this one, I'm getting this one. That's the kind of deal that you don't keep looking for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But, I like how you choose the life before you choose the house. I think that's a really, really insightful piece of advice.
Yeah. If you're planning if you have dogs and you want to walk them to the park, how far is the park? Or if you have kids, how far is the pool? Is there a pool in town? All of these things that people are wanting. One thing that is common is with elderly people, where's the closest hospital? If they're doctoring a little bit more, have to go in for regular checks, and not every town around here has a hospital. So it's okay, from this house, it's 20 miles. It's, an easy highway drive versus, it's interesting, but it is a factor. How's the school district? That's a common one too.
Yeah. And you have to think of those things, people tell me all the time, well, I want a bigger house. I'm like, yeah, but everything you do is going to be 30 to 40 minutes away. For here is a long time, because you have a lot of traffic. Yeah. So do you want to relocate your life? You live in Scottsdale. We're looking in Chandler. Are you going to move everything to Chandler? Because if you're not, you're going to hate living in Chandler because you're going to keep driving to Scottsdale, and then you should get a smaller house here. But if you just had kids and you're like, no, we want a bigger house and a bigger yard, and all our restaurants are going to be down there now. I'm moving my doctors down there now. Then then that makes sense. But, I see people sometimes and they buy in one zip code for the house and they want to live in another zip code for everything that they do. And then the commute, in 2 years, they're like, we want to move again because we hate living down
Yeah.
here, you know? And so it just depends, but you really have to wrap your head around, if I'm moving all my stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just something super important to keep in mind because it's not just that easy to move after 2 years and have to sell, and then you're buying 2 years later where the price is at now, you know?
Correct. Are you outpriced? Like, has your house
Yep.
escalated in the same rate that this house in another area has? And a lot of times it hasn't, and then now you can't buy there. So you just have to really think about, what you want. Very few of my clients that have bought in the area that they wanted regret buying the house. I have clients that bought the house they wanted in the area they didn't really like, and they do regret buying the house and they do want to move. So like, I always try to push people towards the location that they want versus the house that they want.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is working with, a local expert. Wherever you're moving, I'm in the Phoenix Scottsdale area. Tara, where are you located exactly?
Southwest Minnesota, and then over close to the South Dakota border. There's lots of border towns there too. So
Yeah. And so wherever you're, and if you're going to a different area and you have you want a realtor that we recommend in a different area, let us know, because really who you work with is extremely important, and you need the right realtor, and you don't want to just go into that blindly and just hire whoever, because that's how a lot of times people get burned, especially if they're not from the area.
yeah, you might Google an agent and it might be the top Google search because that person's paying money to be the top Google search, but they've only sold 5 houses. Is that really the right fit for you? So it really depends. If you have questions on who you should work with, reach out to us. Danille and I have such a great network across the United States, and we would be happy to answer any questions you have, but also connect you with somebody that can help. So
Awesome. Take care, and we'll see you guys next week.